Part 12. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 111. Chen's chatter all the way, Gu Yunjiao quickly understood. This family's surname is Sun, which is Ant Sun's grandson, and this Sun family is also Ant Sun's maiden family. Not only did his family have 200 mu of land in the countryside, but they also had a shop in the county seat. The mother's husband, Sun Yuan, also took the exam last year as a scholar, and he married the county magistrate's niece. The family became richer and more powerful. However, Sun Yuan did not go this autumn, and the master of the academy said that he was not ready yet. Everything in this village spread quickly, and the next day, the story of Gu Yunjiao saving the Sun family's daughter-in-law spread in the village. It was noon when Gu Yunjiao followed the Sun family, and many people in the village watched her run all the way into the Sun family. She and Chen Shi came out with the medicine box on their backs, and some people saw it. Soon, even the old man Zhang knew that Gu Yunjiao saved the life of the daughter-in-law of the Sun family, and received 5 taels of silver for the diagnosis. When he heard the news, Mr. Zhang was watching people play chess, and there were several old men around. Someone laughed and said, "What a blessing, Lao Zhang, to marry such a capable grandson-in-law and go home." An old man next to him answered, "This grandson-in-law is indeed capable, but she just went to the doctor and earned 5 taels of silver in less than an hour. How many people may not be able to earn 5 taels of silver a year? It's such a good grandson-in-law, who has already separated from the family." The old man also glanced at the old man Zhang. "It's a pity, 5 taels of silver, tisk tisk tisk." Mr. Zhang regretted leaving the big room at first. Hearing this man's ridicule, he became more and more frustrated and went home gloomy. Going home and shutting himself in the house, he thought hard about how to bring Gu Yunjiao back into the big family. This looks really hot. Gu Mei heard about it at home the next day, and Aunt Sun added, "It's all born to the same parents. Your sister's medical skills are so good, why didn't you learn it at all?" Gu Mei was so angry that she pondered for a while in the room. No wonder Gu Yunjiao went home and took away the medical books and golden needles handed down by her ancestors. It turned out that she was prepared. The more she thought about it, the more angry she became. Didn't she just read a few medical books? That's because the medical books handed down from the ancestors are powerful, not her Gu Yunjiao. She is also literate, and she can treat diseases even after reading medical books. After Gu Mei wanted to understand, she couldn't wait to run to the Zhang family's side. When passing by Zhang Yuzi's room, Gu Mei couldn't help but glance inside again. Zhang Yuzi was leaning on the bed, reading a book. Gu Mei's gaze swept across his handsome face recklessly. There were some slight abrasions on his face. Gu Yunjiao didn't give him any medicine, and now the blood is scabbed over. Even so, his face still makes people want to see it. Zhang Yuzi suddenly raised his head and looked at Gu Mei like electricity. Gu Mei was a very strange woman in his heart. He was not interested in Gu Mei, but he was still somewhat interested in her secrets. Gu Mei pouted, he, a lame man, no matter how good looking he is, that's all." She walked forward quickly, walked to the side of the ear room, knocked on the door twice at random, and pushed the door in. Gu Yunjiao was also reading. Not only that, but there were several books on the desk. Gu Mei reached out and took the book on the table. Gu Yunjiao got up and pushed her away. "What are you doing?" Gu Mei said confidently, "I'll take the book. These books are handed down by my ancestors, and I also have a share. Why do you occupy it alone?" The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 112. Gu Yunjiao didn't know what was wrong with Gu Mei, and she wasn't someone who liked to read books. She frowned and said, "Gu Mei, according to what you said, Xiao Chuan and I both have a share of the family's fields, so why should you take all the money? I don't want to talk to you about this." These books are a waste to give you, and even if you take them, you won't read them. Many of the medical books in the family are single copies, and there are some pulse records organized by the ancestors themselves. These things are extremely precious and must not be wasted by Gume. Gume pointed at Gu Yunjiao. Are you afraid that after reading these medical books, my medical skills will be better than yours in the future? Gu Yunjiao had a black question mark on her face. Gume, do you have a head on to look good? You can't think about it? As you put it, those who can read and read a few medical books can become a genius doctor. Why don't you think about it? Why only my father practices medicine in our family, but not the second uncle and the third uncle? Are they illiterate? Didn't grandfather teach them the same way when they were young? Why only dad took over grandpa's mantle? Do you think that with your brain, you can read medical books? Not to mention seeing a doctor. Gu Yunjiao said a lot in one breath, and Gu Mei said unconvinced, why am I out of my mind? Don't think that you are the only smart person in the world. She secretly thought to herself, if you were really smart, I wouldn't be tricked by me to come to Jiang's house to celebrate. Gu Yunjiao took a deep breath. Okay, you need to read a book, right? Then I can't stop you from advancing. She picked up a copy of De Chu Materia Medica on the table. You take this book and read it first, and when you have finished reading it, take this book and exchange it with me. She has just finished reading this book, and she has written down all the contents in the book. Moreover, this book is printed, not a handwritten copy, and it is estimated that it can be bought in the market. Even if Gu Mei is lost, he is not afraid. Seeing that Gu Mei was still staring at other books, Gu Yunjiao said coldly, also, when you exchange this book, I will test the content of your book. If you can't answer it, it means you don't care. Look, or you won't. After that, you don't have to look at anything else. Gu Mei wanted to refute, but was unable to refute. He pointed to the book on the table and said, why do you test me? Do you remember all the books you've read? Gu Yunjiao said indifferently, remember, I don't remember how to achieve integration, how to give people prescriptions to treat diseases. Gu Mei picked up a copy of Qinjia Fang. Have you read this book? Then I'll test you first. Gu Yunjiao didn't say anything. She watched Gu Mei open the book with cold eyes, and stammered to read. She was really anxious to hear it. Gu Mei couldn't even break a sentence. There were 2 typos in a sentence. That's all. Do you still want to study medicine? She opened her mouth, and then Gu Meinian continued, this disease is suitable for Sangxian Weiling decoction, 120 grams of raw and cooked hawthorn, 21 grams of fried malt, and fried divine comedy. Gu Yunjiao finished reading the prescription in one breath. Gu Mei held the book and tried to widen her eyes to find out Gu Yunjiao's mistake, but no, not at all, even the grams were very accurate. After reading, Gu Yunjiao took the book from her hand, and then stuffed the book De Chu Materia Medica into her hand. It took me half a month to read this book. I'll give you a month, come and find it after reading it. I'll switch to something else. Gu Mei was dizzy holding a book and was pushed out by Gu Yunjiao. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 113. Gu Mei came out and stood in the yard for a while. She was a little confused. She felt that her goal had been achieved, and there seemed to be something wrong. She lowered her head all the way and went out thinking. Just as Zhang Erlang came in from outside, she was overjoyed when she saw Gu Mei. She quickly adjusted her direction, and rammed straight towards her. Gu Mei bumped into Zhang Erlang. Zhang Erlang took the opportunity to hold her shoulders and whispered, why are you walking so carelessly? As soon as Gu Mei raised his head, he bumped into Zhang Erlang's eyes, and his eyes stared straight at her, as if to take away her soul. At this time, Zhang Erlang supported her shoulder and rubbed it vaguely, and whispered in her ear, "You look so good looking, it would be nice if you were my daughter-in-law." Gu Mei's face was flushed when she heard this. She pushed Zhang Erlang away in a panic, and ran out quickly. Zhang Erlang looked at her back and licked his lips. Gu Yunjiao sat by the window and looked straight. From her point of view, she could only see Gu Mei's back, but she felt that Gu Mei was not angry and shy, but shy. Haha, no wonder she reminded Gu Mei that day, but she was robbed of it. She suddenly had a feeling that after marrying into the house of the elder, she found Gu Mei, a simple and honest man like Suozu, and the good hand she was holding now might be smashed by her one day. With a blushing blush on Gu Mei's face, she took the book back. Aunt Sun glanced at the book in her hand. "Yo. This is a medical book from your sister, right? Are you planning to start studying medicine?" Gu Mei agreed vaguely, entered the room, and threw the book in his hand away. She sat in front of the dressing table, looked at her delicate face in the mirror, smiled sweetly, and then frowned again. To say that her life is going well. The family can eat meat once every 10 days and a half, and often have eggs, which is similar to the standard of living of her parents. The 3 daughters-in-law take turns for a family's work, once every 3 days, and they can handle it. The lock pillar is also obedient, what she says is what she says. The only fly in the ointment is her married life with Lok Zu. Lock him, his time is too short. Every time, she only got a little fun, and the lock was finished, which made her very uncomfortable. But Lok Zu doesn't feel it yet, thinking that he is normal. She wants to maintain her character as a newly married little daughter-in-law from a blank sheet of paper, and it is not easy to expose it. Besides, what's the use of piercing it? Speaking of being powerful in that respect, it reminded her of one person, Zhang Erlang. Thinking of this, Gu Mei's face turned even redder. Immediately, she thought of something, and her face quickly turned cold. After sending Gu Mei away, Gu Yunjiao heard someone shouting from the yard again, "Little Dr. Gu." Gu Yunjiao got up and went out. Outside was the young man who invited her to Sun's house to see a doctor. The old woman said that his name was Sun Jin. "What? Is your sister-in-law feeling unwell again?" Seeing Gu Yunjiao, Sun Jin seemed a little embarrassed. "My sister-in-law is okay, I just ate eggs, I don't know why, my grandma asked you to come again." Gu Yunjiao nodded, "Wait for me to get the medicine box." Taking out the medicine box, Sun Jin hurriedly took it, and the two left together. Sun Jin's grandmother, Aunt Huang, was waiting in the main room. Tea was served first, and then she sent her grandson away. Then she said, "Dr. Gu, I don't know what to do, so I have to invite you to come." "Ask." "The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 114. Gu Yunjiao nodded, "You said." Aunt Huang sighed, "My grandson-in-law, Hung Mei, may have hurt her body during childbirth 2 days ago, and she has been without milk for the past 2 days. I said it doesn't matter, just go and find a wet nurse. We can still afford a wet nurse in our family." But Hung Mei is stubborn. She doesn't know who to listen to, and the child will kiss whoever's breastfeeding. Hung Mei insisted on breastfeeding herself. She said that the child she gave birth to after earning her life could only kiss her. This morning, the child was carried over, and she sipped blood, but she still had no milk. We all feel distressed when we see it, and we don't know what to do. Aunt Huang thought for a while. "I mean, you saved Hung Mei's life, and Hung Mei is very grateful to you now. Can you tell her that her body can't breastfeed? Now I don't dare to find a wet nurse at home. I take it to someone else's house to feed it once a day, and I can only feed rice soup the rest of the time. It's not a problem to be like this all the time." Gu Yunjiao thought for a while. "I took Sister Hung Mei's pulse a few days ago. Although her body has lost a bit, she is not so weak that she can't breastfeed. You just need to replenish qi and blood and make milk. Aunt Huang was overjoyed. Why, can this milk come out? Gu Yunjiao smiled, naturally. Then please show me a recipe. Aunt Huang happily took Gu Yunjiao to Hungmei's room. Grandma Hungmei was holding the child and was feeding rice soup with a chopstick. Hungmei lay on the bed and looked at her son, her eyes full of distress. Seeing Gu Yunjiao coming in, Hungmei's mother-in-law seemed to have seen a savior. Little Dr. Gu, please persuade this child to find a nanny to save trouble, but she wants to endure this hardship by herself. When Hungmei heard her mother-in-law's words, her lips pursed in displeasure. Hungmei's mother-in-law almost poked the baby with her chopsticks because she turned her head to talk to Gu Yunjiao. Hungmei leaned on the bed and cried out of control, "Mother, child. You almost poked the child." Hungmei's mother-in-law gave her a nonchalant look. "What? No, I've noticed it." Hungmei was about to argue, but she closed her mouth again, tears swirling in her eyes with grievances. Gu Yunjiao walked over, patted Hungmei's hand lightly, and said in a low voice, "I'll show you, if you're healthy, I'll give you a prescription for breastfeeding." When Hungmei heard this, as if she had met a savior, she quickly stretched out her hand and looked at Gu Yunjiao with tears in her eyes. Gu Yunjiao took her pulse carefully. Hungmei's body was in good shape, but the postpartum blood loss caused her body to be somewhat deficient. However, the problem was not that big. Hungmei asked anxiously, "How is it, can my body still breastfeed?" Gu Yunjiao smiled and nodded at her. Hungmei seemed to have been redeemed for a while, with tears in her laughter and a very emotional expression. After taking the pulse, Gu Yunjiao prepared 2 prescriptions. She pointed to one of them and said, "The 3 kinds of medicine here, gun armor, Wang Buletin Liuxing, pass grass, pick it up, wrap it in gauze, and put it in crucian carp soup, goosefoot soup, or pig's trotter soup and simmer it, just drink the soup. This is milk." She pointed to another recipe, "This is for qi and blood, 1 set a day, morning and evening." After prescribing the prescription, Gu Yunjiao went back with a $2 consultation fee. Within 2 days, Mrs. Chen came back and said to Gu Yunjiao, "I just met Aunt Huang, and she thanked you. It is said that Hungmei's milk came out the next day, and now the child is eating well. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 115. After having breakfast that day, Gu Yunjiao did the math. Zhang Yuzi's leg has been broken for a month, so she should check it again to see if the bones are crooked. It's just that there is no X-ray or CT here, so I can only touch it myself. Gu Yunjiao walked outside of Zhang Yuzi's room and glanced in. Liaolang and Gu Chuan were both writing on the table. A Tai sat next to him and read a book, and asked Zhang Yuzi if he didn't understand something. Gu Yunjiao turned around at the door and left. Zhang Yuzi saw that Gu Yunjiao should be looking for him for something, so he wanted to ask Lu Lang to go out, but she left again. When Zhang Yuyi became uneasy, what was the matter with her looking for herself? He waited patiently for half an hour, and seeing that Rokuro and Xiao Chuan were almost written, he said, "That's all for today's homework, you guys can go out and play." After he finished speaking, he paused and said to Xiao Chuan, "If you go out to play with Rokuro, remember to explain to your sister." Gu Chuan nodded, and went out holding hands with Liaolang, and shouted, "Second sister, I've finished my homework, I'm going out to play with brother Liaolang." Gu Yunjiao agreed in the room. Zhang Yuzi sat on the bed and waited, and sure enough, after a while, Gu Yunjiao came over with a bandage. Gu Yunjiao came in and smiled at Zhang Yuzi, "I'll check your bones to see how they look." Then she went to close the window, and then closed the door. Although Gu Yunjiao's heart is open, but she can't open the door and window and touch Zhang Yuzi's lap. If this is seen by the people in the second and third rooms across from her, she doesn't know what to say. When Zhang Yuzi saw Gu Yunjiao closing the window, her face flushed red. He didn't even dare to raise his eyes to look at her, the corner of his eyes swept across her lavender dress, and his whole body twitched. He is very worried now that he will have a reaction that should not appear in a while. Gu Yunjiao quickly found that Zhang Yuzi blushed. He was flushed from face to neck, and it was hard for her to pretend she couldn't see him. In order to ease the embarrassment, Gu Yunjiao smiled, "Are you a little nervous? Afraid that I will hurt you?" Zhang Yuzi had to follow her words with a vague Gu Yunjiao lifted the quilt as she spoke. Zhang Yuzi turned his face to one side, closed his eyes like an ostrich, and recited the Heart Sutra in his heart. When the quilt was lifted, Gu Yunjiao saw that Zhang Yuzi was wearing a blue cotton robe close to her body, but no small clothes. She seemed to be inadvertent, but she actually skillfully opened her robe to cover the place she shouldn't see, and then sat on the edge of the bed and began to untie the bandage. Zhang Yuzi recited silently for a while that color is emptiness and color, maybe there is some effect, and his mood is a little calmer. But when he opened his eyes and saw Gu Yunjiao untie the bandage, he became nervous again. For the past month, Rokuro and Atai would wipe his body every day and change his clothes every few days. But the splinted leg hasn't been scrubbed for a month. Think dirty. Seeing her so dirty, she should despise him. Thinking of this, Zhang Yuzi felt uncomfortable again. Gu Yunjiao has quickly untied the bandage and took off the splint. Zhang Yuzi only felt cold on his legs, and then a pair of soft, warm, and delicate hands touched them. Gu Yunjiao never did rough work at home before, and her hands were originally tender. After marrying into the Zhang family, chopping firewood and hogweed has worn out calluses on his hands. After the family split, she no longer needed to do the rough work, and this hand was slowly brought back. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 116. Zhang Yuzi didn't wait for Gu Yunjiao's disgust to relax. For a while, all her senses were placed on the skin of her thighs. She only felt that wherever her palm went, it was soft and smooth, and it seemed to carry an indescribable fragrance. There was a vague thought in his mind that if only those hands could stay on his lap for a while longer. Gu Yunjiao didn't know Zhang Yuzi's thoughts, so she carefully touched his leg bones, back and forth several times. Zhang Yuzi's heart also rose and fell with her hand. Gu Yunjiao smiled happily after touching it. Fortunately, the bones are not crooked. Zhang Yuzi's charming mind was finally pulled back, and he said softly, "Then I won't be lame." Gu Yunjiao shook her head as she reclamped him. "It's too early to say this. If it's not crooked now, it doesn't mean it won't be crooked in the future. In short, it's hard to say until the bones are fully grown. Just pay attention to yourself and don't move around. If the splint becomes loose, you can quickly call me to fix it for you." Zhang Yuzi nodded. Just as he was about to say something, a young man's voice came from the courtyard outside. "Brother Zhang is at home." Zhang Yuzi's face changed. This was Zheng Juren's voice. Then Su's his Hong's voice also rang. "Auntie, Brother Zheng and Brother Zhou came to visit Yuzi specially." Then there was a knock on the door, and Chen's voice, "Yuji, your classmate came to see you. Why is your door closed, and who is inside?" In the panic, Zhang Yuzi and Gu Yunjiao looked at each other. Both of their faces turned red at the same time. In broad daylight, a man and a woman were alone in a room, and the door was plugged in. This was discovered, but it was hard to argue. Gu Yunjiao was a little flustered in her heart, but her hands were still very stable, and she tied the last knot. She was thinking about whether she wanted to hide under the bed temporarily, when she heard Zhang Yuzi whisper, "The kitchen door should not be closed, you go there. Get out." When Gu Yunjiao heard this, she instantly felt that her brain was a match. Zhang Yuzi's room was originally connected to the main room and the kitchen that had been converted into the back room. How could she forget this? She didn't care to pull up Zhang Yuzi's robe, so she stood up and whispered, "Then I'll go out first, and I'll ask Atai to come over from the kitchen to open the door." Zhang Yuzi nodded, and Gu Yunjiao quickly pushed open the door of the kitchen and came out. At this time, she heard Zhang Yuzi answering in the room, "Mother, Atai is changing my clothes for me, please wait a few dear brothers." Gu Yunjiao then turned to look at Atai, who was reading a book while sitting on a pony. Atai was focused on reading the book, but he had no idea what was going on outside. Gu Yunjiao had no choice but to go over and shake him, "Go to Saburo's house and open the door. If anyone asks you, they will say that he was changing Saburo's clothes just now. Open the door, you come out from there." In Atai's heart, Gu Yunjiao is God, and he will not have any doubts about what she says. He opened the kitchen door and went over. Gu Yunjiao quickly closed the door behind him. Zhang Yuzi in the room had already pulled up his robe, covered the quilt, and even sorted out the expression on his face. When Su Zhaizhong and Zheng Juren came in, what they saw was a boy with drooping brows and eyes, as if he had no hope in life and no fighting spirit. But Zhang Yuzi has been sitting still every day recently, eating well, and the whole person seems to have gained a lot of weight, and with this expression, it looks weird. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 117. A few classmates were not suspicious. They had never seen such a fat Zhang Yuzi, and they only felt very incongruous. Thinking about it carefully, oh, it turned out to be a swollen face. Pitiful. Chen Shi sent the guests in, and he was shocked to see Zhang Yuzi like this. This child has been very cheerful recently, so what happened all of a sudden? When there were guests, she didn't say much, and hurriedly went around to the kitchen to pour tea. Going around to the kitchen, Gu Yunjiao had already prepared the tea. Chen Shi brought the tea in, and when he came to the kitchen, he saw Gu Yunjiao put the red dates on a plate, and sent Atai to send it over. Red dates are used by Gu Yunjiao to simmer Angelica and astragalus every day, and there are no treats for guests at home, so she can only use this to top up temporarily. Zheng Juren sat down in the room and saw that Atai came in with a plate of red dates. A trace of contempt flashed across Zheng Juren's eyes. It was the first time he came to Zhang Yu's house, and he didn't expect his family to be so poor. The tables, chairs, and benches are all old things that have fallen off the paint, and the teacups are also thick porcelain cups. Even if you are entertaining guests, you can't even bring out a decent snack, just a plate of red dates. In the past, although Zhang Yuzi wore simple clothes, he always had a noble temperament on his body that was hard to ignore. Fortunately, he thought that Zhang Yuzi's family was rich, but he didn't like to show off. Looking at it now, it is really poor. There were several patches on the quilt. Zheng Juren looked away from the quilt and said, "I should have come to visit Brother Zhang long ago. It's just that there have been so many things lately, and I have never been free. Brother Jiang's legs, are they better?" Zhang Yuzi shook his head sadly. "Brother Zheng, haven't you heard of it? I can't save my leg, and Dr. Li in the county has said that he will be lame in all likelihood. Thinking about it, this is the end of my road to fame." After lying in bed for a month, Zhang Yu had long since figured out that he was hated by others for having this catastrophe. He was young and didn't know how to restrain himself. He was the first in the academy's Hui-10 exams, and the masters of the academy also favored him. When Tixu came to inspect, several masters in the academy had intentionally asked him to show his face in front of Tixu, so that he could have a better relationship in the future. He also followed the trend, and he really got the appreciation of the school. But, the wood show will be destroyed by the forest wind. I think it was because he was too popular, and some people couldn't stand it anymore, so he made 2 shots in a row, just to completely cut off his future. From now on, he must keep a low profile and keep a low profile. He deliberately made a decadent appearance, saying that his leg was not saved, but also to reassure those who murdered him. Zheng Juren said with a smile, "It's not impossible, Brother Zhang, please relax and cultivate well." Zhang Yuzi smiled sadly, "Brother Zheng doesn't need to comfort me, now that I have accepted my fate, I will be able to go to the ground in a few months, and I will no longer think about the imperial examination, find a place to sit in a hall, and support my family." Su Zheizhong and Zhou Jing both comforted Zhang Yuzi. Then Zheng Juren said with a bit of pride, "I'm going to go to the capital to participate in the spring festival. Before I left, I remembered Brother Jiang's condition, so I came to see Brother Jiang, and said goodbye to Brother Jiang by the way." Zhang Yuzi hurriedly cupped his hands, don't dare, don't dare. Brother Zheng is here, and he must be named on the gold list. My brother congratulates Brother Zheng for a bright future." Su Zheizhong and Zhou Jing also congratulated Zheng Juren, as if Zheng Juren had already passed the Jinshi examination. Zheng Juren's mouth was modest, but his expression was triumphant. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 118. Zhang Yuzi took the time to look out the window while everyone was not paying attention to him. Both Su Zheizhong and Zheng Juren brought their servants, both of whom were wearing blue cotton robes. As if this robe was the uniform of the servants. Zhang Yuzi sighed suddenly and said to several people, "Actually, my younger brother fell from the building that day, and he clearly felt that he was pushed from behind and fell down. That man." Having said that, Zhang Yuzi paused. His eyes swept across the three faces in front of him without a trace. Zhou Jing and Su Zheizhong both looked surprised, while Zheng Juren twitched the corners of his mouth and suddenly became angry. How could this happen? This pushes Brother Zhang. Who was it that went down? Zhang Yuzi sighed, "I don't know that. People pushed from behind me, and I didn't see it." Su Zheizhong said, "Then report to the official, you have fame, murdering your life, even the county magistrate should pay attention to it." Zhang Yuzi shook his head, "It's just that I was dizzy at the time. After I woke up, I was worried about the money for the treatment. I didn't have time to think about it. It's been a long time now." Having said that, Zhang Yuzi paid attention to Zheng Juren again, and found that he seemed relieved. And Su Zheizhong and Zhou Jing were obviously still thinking. Zhang Yuzi narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Zheng Juren instructed the servant to do it? After a long while, Su Zheizhong said, "Could it be that Brother Zhang had a grudge against someone?" Zhang Yuzi shook his head, "Never. I think maybe some drunk guy got drunk and pushed the next." Su Zheizhong sighed, "So, it's really a disaster?" "It's very, very, very unlucky, Brother Zhang." To Zhou Jing replied. Zheng Juren also sighed, and after a few more gossip, he got up and said goodbye. Zhang Yuzi sat on the bed and cupped his hands, "My dear friends, it's easy to leave, please forgive me that I really can't get up and see you off." The three of them said, "Brother Zhang, don't be too polite." Several people left and were about to leave when Gu Chuan grabbed a turtle and ran into the yard, shouting, "Sister, sister, I caught the turtle." Gu Yunjiao caught a turtle last time, and now Sanya is raising it. Gu Chuan wanted to eat it very much, because his father asked the villagers to collect turtles before, and the turtle meat was stewed and eaten, and the turtle shells were used as medicinal materials. Gu Chuan likes eating turtles, especially turtle eggs. But Sanya didn't allow him to eat her turtle, so Gu Yunjiao said casually, "I'll make it for you when you catch it yourself." Gu Chuan caught one today, thinking that he could eat turtles, so he was very excited. Gu Yunjiao originally planned to stay in the kitchen until Zhang Yuzi's classmate left. Hearing Gu Chuan yelling outside, she had to come out, stand at the door of the kitchen, and wave to Gu Chuan. As soon as they came out, Su Zheizhong, Zheng Juren and Zhou Jing, who had just walked into the yard, looked over here. Su Zhaizhong was slightly startled when he saw Gu Yunjiao. He remembered that he had met Gu Yunjiao about a month ago. At that time, she was thin and dry like a flower that lacked water. Although she was still pretty, she was very pretty. It's only been a month since she hasn't seen her. She seems to have grown taller and has more flesh on her face. The whole person is like a flower bud that has drunk enough water and is about to slowly bloom. Although the beauty of this flower has not been fully revealed, it can be predicted how charming this vigorous bud will be once it fully blooms. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 119. Seeing the three of them looking over, Gu Yunjiao had to bow her head, and then went back to the kitchen. Zheng Juren's eyes flickered. Is this Yuji's girl? Su Zhaizhong hurriedly said, No, no, this is Yuzi's widowed sister-in-law. Zheng Juren let out an "oh," glanced at the kitchen, and walked away slowly. In the kitchen, Gu Chuan held the turtle. Sister, I caught this, can I stew it now? Gu Yunjiao didn't know how to do this at all. She didn't even know how to get the turtle out of its shell, so she simply shook her head. It's too small, there's no meat, it's not enough to eat, let's keep it for now. She pointed to the tortoise. Go and keep it with Sanya's one, be careful it runs away. Gu Chuan came out of the kitchen in disappointment, ran to Sanya's room, and put his tortoise with Sanya's. He came out of the house and saw that two carriages had just left outside the yard, and another carriage came over. A thin middle-aged man got off the carriage. The middle-aged man looked around at the door and asked Gu Chuan, is this the Zhang family? Qilang stuck his head out at the door. It's the Zhang family, who are you looking for? The middle-aged man pondered, I'm looking for Gu. I'm looking for Dr. Xiao Gu. Shishiro snorted and went into the house without saying a word. Gu Chuan shouted outside, Sister, someone is looking for you. Gu Yunjiao came out of the kitchen and raised her eyebrows in surprise. Manager Wang, why are you here? Shopkeeper Wang was overjoyed when she saw Gu Yunjiao. Fortunately, I didn't find the wrong place. I went to your mother's house first, and only then did I know that you were married to Qingshan village. He smiled at Gu Yunjiao. Uncle has something to ask you. Gu Yunjiao nodded. Tell me, see if I can help. Shopkeeper Wang said in a low voice, some time ago, Qian Kaotu in the Yamen developed an abscess on the back of his neck. He asked Dr. Lu to prescribe medicine in my shop. I took the medicine and applied the medicine, but it's still not good. He ran to me today and said he was going to smash my shop. I can't help it either. Remembering what the kid said last time, you cured him of a bad sore, so I wanted to ask you to show him. I really can't do anything about it. As long as there is a way, he will not come to find a little girl. Just as he was talking, Mr. Zhang came over. He came in from outside, and he recognized the shopkeeper Wang at a glance when he saw the drugstore. You know, as long as you go to the Wang family pharmacy to get the medicine, there is no one who doesn't know the shopkeeper Wang. Therefore, half of the people in this county looked at shopkeeper Wang with familiarity. Shopkeeper Wang opened his only pharmacy in the county town, and he was considered a prominent figure in the county town. Mr. Zhang felt that he should make friends. Mr. Zhang smiled and bowed to shopkeeper Wang first. Boss, which gust of wind brought you here today? Shopkeeper Wang glanced at him. The old man did not know him. He laughed awkwardly. I have something to do with Dr. Gu. Then he anxiously said to Gu Yunjiao, look, can you save uncle? If you want, let's go. I'm afraid that I'm going to be late, and Qianzaiatu will smash my shop. Gu Yunjiao nodded. Sure, I'll come with you. She shouted towards the kitchen, Atai, take out my medicine cabinet and come with me to the doctor. Atai agreed and took out the medicine box from the room. Gu Yunjiao said to Chen's room again, "Mother, I and shopkeeper Wang went to the county town for a doctor's visit. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jinkui. Chapter 120. Inside, Mrs. Chen rushed out, "Come back early, don't come back until it gets dark, the road is not safe." Gu Yunjiao nodded and walked away. Shopkeeper Wang hurriedly followed. Mr. Zhang stood there, and no one paid him any attention. He stood in the yard with a gloomy face, and he could see that manager Wang was begging Gu Yunjiao when he spoke today. Even the shopkeeper Wang asked her, which shows the girl's ability. That dead girl Gu Yunjiao was also rude, she didn't even know how to introduce him and shopkeeper Wang. She didn't even call herself grandpa, just like she didn't see herself, she just left. "This is because I feel that the family is separated, and I can't control her anymore, right?" Mr. Zhang returned to the room with a sullen face, picked up the dry cigarette and started smoking. At this time, Gu Yunjiao and shopkeeper Wang had already left the village entrance. The carriage ran for half an hour and finally reached the county seat. The Wang family pharmacy is still the same. However, there was one more person in the lobby. A man in a public uniform sat in Dr. Liu's seat with his neck tucked, his feet in soap boots slumped on the table. Dr. Liu stood beside him, like a pupil who made a mistake, he didn't dare to let out the air. He suddenly saw shopkeeper Wang and Gu Yunjiao come in from the door, wiped a sweat, and said to Qian Chatu, that, "Mr. Qian, Shinai Gu is here. Gu Shinai's medicine is like a god, and it doesn't matter about any incurable diseases. I can be optimistic about your disease." He said that on purpose. He couldn't cure a bad sore. If a little girl like Gu Yunjiao was cured, it would only mean that he was incompetent and a quack doctor. But he first put on Gu Yunjiao the hat of a genius doctor to prove that it was not that he was incompetent, but that Gu Yunjiao's medical skills were too good. Qian Katu stiffly looked behind the shopkeeper Wang, there was a little girl, and there was a smaller boy behind, and then, no one? Who is the genius doctor? Shopkeeper Wang approached with a smile, "Qian Zayatu, Dr. Gu has invited you here. Why don't you sit here so that Dr. Gu can take your pulse?" He just heard what Dr. Liu said, and naturally he had to follow it. He also didn't want people outside to say that Dr. Liu in his shop was a quack doctor. Qian Katu laughed angrily, "Who is the genius doctor? Which one is the genius doctor? Don't you humming fool me." Shopkeeper Wang pointed at Gu Yunjiao, "This is Dr. Gu. I'm not fooling you, Dr. Gu, you know, she is the daughter of Dr. Gu." Gu Yunjiao laughed in her heart, her father was simply a golden sign, as long as her father was sacrificed, those who didn't believe her at first would become dubious. Shopkeeper Wang then flicked, "Shinai Gu has been extremely talented in studying medicine since he was a child. Although he is young now, his medical skills have already surpassed that of Dr. Gu." Gu Yunjiao looked at shopkeeper Wang with a half smile but not a smile. He was really able to play on his own, and it was very similar to what he said. When Qian Zayatu heard that it was Dr. Gu's daughter, his face really improved a lot. Dr. Gu's medical skills can be said to be the best in the county, and almost no one does not know it. He put his feet off the table, with some doubts, can this little girl really do it? Gu Yunjiao smiled at him, "You're laughing, I'm not a genius doctor, I just learned something from my father since I was a child." "Well, let me show you first." Shopkeeper Wang did not dare to ask Qian Katu to move the place, and moved a chair for Gu Yunjiao to sit on. Gu Yunjiao opened the medicine box, took out the pulse pillow and put it under Qian Katu's wrist, and then began to take the pulse.